This morning, a possible legal shakeup for President Trump's personal lawyer, Michael Cohen. A source tells NBC News Cohen may be parting ways with his attorney as investigators dig into his business dealings.
Plus, President Trump's admiration for autocrats continuing. He's praising the leaders of North Korea and China and doubling down on his call to readmit Russia to the G7.
And as Republicans try to hammer out the details of two competing immigration bills, we're getting an inside look at a detention center housing more than 1,000 undocumented immigrant minors. Good morning, everyone. It's Thursday, June 14th. I'm Ayman Mohideen alongside Yasmin Vasugian and Louis Bergdorf. We begin with the intensifying legal pressure on the president's personal attorney, Michael Cohen. NBC News has confirmed that he is expected to split with his current attorneys, and many are now wondering what that means for the president. NBC's Kristen Welker has more from the White House.
Is Michael Cohen ready to cooperate with federal investigators? That's the question looming over the White House. After ABC News reported Cohen, the president's longtime fixer and personal attorney, is likely to strike a deal with prosecutors. So far, Cohen hasn't been charged, and several sources familiar with the matter tell NBC News Cohen has not even spoken with prosecutors. Still, adding fuel, Cohen is looking to shake up his legal team, according to sources close to the situation. It comes as prosecutors are poring over documents they seized from Cohen's office and residences in a dramatic April FBI raid. Federal investigators in New York are focusing on Cohen's business dealings, including that $130,000 payment to porn star Stormy Daniels just before the 2016 election.
Michael Cohen should absolutely be concerned about being charged. The FBI executed a search warrant on his residence and his office. They don't do that lightly, and they don't do that without cause.
The Cohen case came out of Robert Mueller's Russia probe, who referred it to investigators in New York. That April raid sparking fury from President Trump.
It's frankly a real disgrace. It's an attack on our country in a true sense. It's an attack on what we all stand for.
Mr. Trump later tweeting, most people will flip if the government lets them out of trouble. Sorry, I don't see Michael doing that.
The danger to the president is that Mr. Cohen, if he cooperates, will be required to cooperate broadly. He'll have to tell everything he knows to anyone who asks.
The president's attorney, Rudy Giuliani, tells NBC News he's not concerned about Michael Cohen flipping, adding he has no information suggesting Cohen is going to flip. Amen.
All right, our thanks to NBC's Kristen Welker for that report.
All right, in an interview that aired on Fox News last night, President Trump shared his admiration for autocratic rulers, again praising China's President Xi Jinping for his iron grip on his government and dismissing Kim Jong-un's brutal treatment, imprisonment, and murder of those he suspects of opposing his regime. Take a listen.
I have a very good relationship with President Xi of China. He's, an incredible guy. They just, essentially president for life. It's pretty good. Chairman Kim wants to resolve the problem. We have a very, I really say for a fairly short-term relationship, because it was unbelievably hostile, the rhetoric. Rhetorically, it was unbelievably hostile. And I think we have a very good relationship. We understand each other.
You call people sometimes killers. He is a killer. I mean, he's clearly executing people.
He's a tough guy. Hey, when you take over a country, tough country, with tough people, and you take it over from your father, I don't care who you are, what you are, how much of an advantage you have. If you can do that at 27 years old, that's 1 in 10,000 that could do that. So he's a very smart guy. He's a great negotiator. But I think we understand each other.
But he's still done some really bad things.
Yeah, but so have a lot of other people done some really bad things. I could go through a lot of nations where a lot of bad things were done.
Okay, so President Trump's words are similar to his view of the assassination of Russian President Vladimir Putin's opponents, equating it to actions of the United States.
Do you like Vladimir Putin's comments about you?
Sure. When people call you brilliant, it's always good, especially when the person heads up Russia.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, also as a person that kills journalists, political opponents, and
invades countries.
And invades countries. Obviously, it would be a concern, would it not?
He's running his country, and at least he's a leader, you know, unlike what we have in this country.
No, but again, he kills journalists that don't agree with him.
Well, I think our country does plenty of killing also, Joe.
Putin's a killer. A lot of killers. We got a lot of killers. Why, you think our country's so innocent? You think our country's so innocent?
I don't know of any government leaders that are killers anymore.
Well, take a look at what we've done too.
All right, so President Trump also discussed his desire to have Russia readmitted to the G7 and his relationship with Vladimir Putin.
I'm not for Russia. I'm for the United States. But as an example, if Vladimir Putin were sitting next to me at a table instead of one of the others, and we were having dinner the other night in Canada, I could say, would you do me a favor? Would you get out of Syria? Would you do me a favor? Would you get out of the Ukraine? Get out of Ukraine. You shouldn't be there. Just come on. Now, I think I'd probably have a good relationship with him. Or I'd be able to talk to him better than if you call somebody on a telephone and talk. I will tell you, as an example, if he were at that meeting, I could ask him to do things that are good for the world, that are good for our country, that are good for him. A reporter asked me, do you think you'd be better off with Russia? I said, absolutely. You know, we spend probably 25% of our time talking about Russia. And I said to myself, wouldn't it be better if they were here? And a lot of people agree with me.
Despite all that he's done to us, you think he's going to...
Yeah, but he didn't... I'm not sticking up for anybody. I'm just saying this. He didn't respect our leadership previously. He walked all over them. Look what he did to Obama with Crimea. He took Crimea. He took Ukraine. Sections of Ukraine.
Which is why he got kicked out of the G8.
No, I know, but he didn't respect our leadership. He didn't respect it. And so, but this wasn't me.
What's so interesting is beyond the killings, he's actually blaming President Obama for Russia's invasion of Crimea. And not necessarily acknowledging until the reporter says that's why he got kicked out of the G7.
And there's a simplistic worldview that he thinks just by simply having a dinner with a world leader like Vladimir Putin saying, hey, do me a favor, bud, can you get out of Crimea?
Oh,
that Vladimir Putin is going to be like, oh, absolutely, anything for you, and completely like missing the point that a lot of world leaders have actually brought it up to Putin, please get out of these countries. He has refused to do so because he thinks it's in his own strategic interest. So interesting, nonetheless.
And guys, one of the other major headlines from the Trump-Kim summit was the president announcing he was ending the, quote, war games exercises with South Korea. And in the interview, he went one step further. Take a listen.
I would love to get the military out as soon as we can because it costs a lot of money for us. We don't get paid fully for that military, which, you know, I'll be talking to South Korea about. But we have 32,000 soldiers in South Korea. I'd like to get them home. I would like to, but it is not on the table right now. At the appropriate time, it will be.
The U.S. has on average about 28,500 troops stationed in South Korea at any given time, and Seoul pays for about half the cost, which was about $821 million back in 2016. Meanwhile, one of the main takeaways Trump is touting as a success is Kim Jong-un's agreement to return the remains of American troops killed during the Korean War.
We have thousands of people that have asked for that. Thousands and thousands of people. So many people asked when I was on the campaign. I'd say, wait a minute, I don't have any relationship. But they said, when you can, President, we'd love our son to be brought back home. You know, the remains. And I asked, we had pretty much finished, and I said, would you do me a favor? The remains of these great fallen heroes, could we do something? He agreed to it immediately. It's pretty great.
Now, per the VA, the average age of Korean War veterans is an estimated 87 years old, meaning that the parents asking for their son's remains, if still alive, would be well over 100.
Give us the key if you've got it to live that long, that's for sure. We're learning new details, everybody, this morning about the two GOP immigration bills the House is expected to vote on next week. One of the bills is a compromise measure aimed at bridging the divide between moderates and conservatives. According to Republican Congressman Jeff Denham, the compromise bill will include a provision that children will not be separated from their parents at the border. The congressman says the bill will also protect dreamers who are in the United States now, eliminate the diversity lottery, that include $25 billion for border security. At a closed-door meeting yesterday, Speaker Paul Ryan reportedly told House Republicans that he had spoken to President Trump and that he seemed, quote, very supportive of the compromise measure.
This has a chance of going into law because, like I said before, last thing I want to do is bring a bill out of here that I know the president won't support. Well, we've been working hand in glove with the administration on this to make sure that we're bringing a bill that represents the president's 4 pillars so that we can come together, have the votes that everybody's looking for, but more importantly, this represents a consensus between our members.
All right, meanwhile, MSNBC correspondent Jacob Soboroff got an inside look yesterday, fascinating look at an immigrant detention center in Texas where more than 1,000 children are currently being held. The facility is a former Walmart, believe it or not. And according to Soboroff, the children get only 2 hours a day to be outside. Wow. Here's how he described what he saw last night.
This place is called a shelter, but effectively these kids are incarcerated. There are 1,400 of them, over 1,400 of them, that are spending not weeks, months inside this place. They're not actually literally in cages or in cells, but I kid you not, one of the first things an employee of the shelter said to me is, when we walked inside, can you try to smile at these kids? Because it's weird to see people from the outside. They feel like animals locked up in cages being looked at. It was an extraordinary thing to see.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely incredible description Jacob provided there. That was Jacob Soboroff, MSNBC's Jacob Soboroff. He's going to have a lot more on what he saw coming up in just a little bit on Morning Joe, including a Trump mural that he saw inside of the facility when he walked in there. All right, joining us now, reporter for the Washington Post, Eugene Scott. Eugene, great to have you with us early this morning. So given the likelihood that the House may pass 2 immigration bills, as we heard there Paul Ryan talking about, could we see the Senate move to act on immigration before November and the midterms?
There's certainly incentive to from voters on both sides of the aisle. The optics of these situations, which we just saw Soboroff describe, has been alarming to Republican and Democrats alike. And this is an issue that's not likely to go away before the midterms. And so Congress would be in their best interest, according to some voters, to address it as quickly as possible.
Let's talk about the new revelation that we've been hearing with regards to Michael Cohen and his legal team here, and the fact that he's possibly dropping his legal team. Do you think that could create more pressure for the president here to sit down sooner with Bob Mueller?
Certainly, especially considering that the president kind of already does want to sit down and has said that he does. What his legal team will advise is worth paying attention to. But I think one of the main takeaways from where we are right now in the Michael Cohen story is just how unsupported and neglected Cohen allegedly feels from the president himself. And it will be interesting to see if the president makes any changes to that, considering what could come from that.
Let's switch gears for a moment and talk about the Kim summit. What do you think the appetite is going to be on Capitol Hill, including members of the president's own party, about the way the president has announced his desire to withdraw troops from South Korea, the ending of the military exercises, even the praise for the North Korean dictator?
Well, we've seen Republican lawmakers since Trump got in the White House pretty much go with anything that he has put forward. And we even saw Paul Ryan mention in the previous clip that the main goal is to just do things that make Trump happy or that Trump will support legislatively. Whether or not Republican voters will be as sensitive and understanding to the president's willingness to work with someone with such a long list of human rights violations remains to be seen, but Democratic lawmakers are certainly going to make sure that they know that not much has changed from North Korea.
All right, Eugene Scott live in Washington, D.C. for us. We'll touch base with you in a little bit.
Sure.
Still ahead, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo seems to take a page out of the president's playbook and criticizes the press, but a new poll shows how voters feel about what Trump calls fake news.
And later, Senator Bob Corker lashes out again at his GOP colleagues over their fear of upsetting President Trump. What he's saying this time, those stories, and of course, we'll check on your weather when we come back. Welcome back, everybody. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was in Seoul, South Korea just hours ago, giving a personal briefing to President Moon Jae-in on the developments with North Korea, which Pompeo says will move forward, quote, fairly quickly. On a contentious briefing, though, with reporters, Pompeo agreed the objective is for major disarmament before the end of President Trump's first term, about 2.5 years from now. But Pompeo balked when asked for details about President Trump's claim there will be verifiable denuclearization. From the transcript, a reporter said, quote, the president said it will be verified. Pompeo said this, of course it will. Asked, can you tell us a little bit more? Pompeo said, of course it will. As the reporter added about what was discussed, about how, Pompeo replied, just so you know, I find that question insulting and ridiculous and frankly ludicrous. I just have to be honest with you. It's a game and one ought not play games with serious matters like this.
All right, President Trump is declaring the press the biggest enemy, but Americans don't necessarily see it that way. In fact, a national survey from Public Policy Polling found that majorities trust news organizations over the president. Asked in individual questions, voters said that they trust NBC, ABC, and CBS more than they trust Donald Trump, by an average of 53% to 39%. CNN is regarded more trustworthy than Trump, 53% to 38%, while the New York Times and Washington Post also have the trust of half of the country, as less than 4 in 10 Americans side with the president. Still, Trump tweeted yesterday, so funny to watch the fake news, especially NBC and CNN. They are fighting hard to downplay the deal with North Korea. 500 days ago, they would have begged for this deal. Looked like war would break out. Our country's biggest enemy is the fake news so easily promulgated by fools.
All right, switching gears here, let's get a check on your weather now with NBC meteorologist Bill Cairns. And Bill, you are tracking some severe weather that happened last night over Pennsylvania, but you say today is going to be a beautiful day here in New York, and that's all Yasmin and Eamon really care about.
Yes, they do love that, but unfortunately for the people in Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, they got hit by a tornado last night, specifically the Wilkes-Barre area. This was a little mall right around 10 p.m. last night. There was a Panera Bread located in there. You could see some of the damage. Cars were flipped in the parking lot. For a while, some people were trapped in the buildings. There were some minor injuries, but no fatalities, and they said that none of the injuries are too serious, but a lot of some of the vehicles that was flipped was like a truck. All right, so let's get into that forecast. That cold front that went through with those storms is gone. Just a few showers to the north, and as we mentioned, it's going to be a very nice summer-like day in the Ohio Valley and through the Northeast. A little cool still in New England, but everywhere from the Mid-Atlantic to the Ohio Valley, nearly perfect. So today, the area of concern takes us into the Dakotas, from Minot to Bismarck over to Fargo. Enhanced risk of severe storms, maybe an isolated tornado. Biggest threat's going to be large hail and wind damage as we go throughout the day. And how about the heat? It just doesn't stop. 109 in Phoenix today. The little magenta you see here in Kansas and Nebraska and a little South Dakota, that's 100-degree temperature. So very hot through the middle of the nation. In the southeast, we'll have our typical afternoon storms. The upcoming weekend, guys, is going to see this heat on the move. And for Father's Day, it looks like the East Coast is going to see some of the warmest temperatures that it's seen so far this year.
It's going to be a nice little present for you.
Yeah, and hopefully for you as well. You're doing something nice for your husband for Father's Day.
Oh, right, yes.
Okay, moving right along.
Of course.
Still ahead, after 4 years, the wait is nearly over as the 2018 World Cup kicks off in just a few hours from now. Meanwhile, 2026 may still be 8 years away, but it's a wait North American soccer fans will happily endure. We're going to tell you why next in sports.
I hope he's not watching.
His long list of scandals.
And it keeps growing. Plus, the pressure seems to be ramping up on Trump's personal lawyer, Michael Cohen. We're going to bring in a legal expert standing behind me right now, David Savalos.
Is he?
Yeah, to talk more about this. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Yasmin Vasugian alongside Ayman Mohyeddin and Louis Bergdorf. It is the bottom of the hour. Let's start with the morning's top stories. Speaking to reporters yesterday, retiring Senator Bob Corker once again challenged his fellow Republicans for their absolute fealty to President Trump.
Look, we're in a strange place. I mean, it's almost you know, it's becoming a cultish thing, isn't it? It's not a good place for any party to end up with a cult-like situation as it relates to a president that happens to be purportedly of the same parties.
Trying to soften the blow by saying cult-ish or cult-like. Corker's comments came the day after he hit Republican lawmakers for blocking legislation that would have put checks on the president's ability to levy tariffs. Meanwhile, Senator Lindsey Graham took a different approach than Corker when talking about why conservative Congressman Mark Sanford, who criticized President Trump's behavior, lost his primary bid. Take a listen.
I think being on the wrong side of Trump and the way he did it probably hurt. He was a critic, and it's okay to be critical, but you also have to add value.
All right, this is House Speaker Paul Ryan dismissed the notion that Sanford's defeat in this result in South Carolina of Congressman's poor relationship was to blame with President Trump.
It was a very close election. Some of our members have lost primaries. That's just what happens in contested primaries.
Should it be a warning to people who oppose the president?
Every cycle people lose primaries. This happens.
Now, following his primary loss, Sanford disputed that his party and this country has now become a cult of personality.
What we're about as a nation is not being for or against one personality. Again, we're a nation of laws and not men, as the founding fathers said.
Congressman Sanford will have much more on his defeat and the role his criticism of the president may have played in that defeat coming up in the 7 o'clock hour of Morning Joe.
And EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt is facing yet another scandal in his nonstop list of controversies. This time he's being accused of using an agency aid to ask big Republican donors to help find his wife a job, according to the Washington Post. Citing multiple individuals familiar with the matter, Pruitt had the aid contact Doug Deason, a prominent donor with ties to the oil industry, last year for a job for Marilyn Pruitt. The Post says when Deason said he could not hire Miss Pruitt because of a conflict of interest, Pruitt continued to lean on him for help in trying to find other possibilities. Ms. Pruitt eventually landed a job at the conservative political group, the Judicial Crisis Network, which has backed her husband for years. Now, a spokesperson for the network confirmed to the paper that Marilyn Pruitt was hired temporarily as an independent contractor, but left the organization earlier this year. In the wake of the latest controversy, Republican Senator Jim Inhofe of Oklahoma is questioning whether his longtime friend should actually keep his job.
I see these things, they upset me as much as they upset you, and I think something needs to happen to change that. One of those alternatives would be for him to leave that job.
In an interview with the Washington Post following that radio interview, Inhofe said that he was not calling on Pruitt to resign, but the conservative magazine, The National Review, is calling for Pruitt to be replaced. In an editorial published yesterday, the magazine applauded Pruitt's deregulatory work, but said it's time for him to go do his numerous scandals.
All right, let's talk about this yet again. Joining us now, reporter for the Washington Post, Eugene Scott. Eugene, good to see you once again. Another day, another scandal for Scott Pruitt. I asked once again, I think as we've been asking for the last, how long? 5-6 months or so?
I've lost track, to be honest with you. I'm not going to even lie.
What is it behind Pruitt's staying power?
And we will probably continue to see scandals like this happening. I think what's behind the staying power is that he has a positive relationship with the president. And as long as Trump sees him as someone who he shares something with, what he would interpret as criticism from the media, he's likely to remain in good favor with the president, and therefore the president won't push him out. But I do think it's worth noting that some of the president's closest allies, at least from his kitchen cabinet, from Fox News, are increasingly calling on people like Pruitt to leave, and so we could see a turn of things from Trump.
Well, Eugene, let me ask you about the Republican Party and its relationship with Bob Corker, given the recent comments that he's been making. Where does that relationship go? Do you get the sense the Republican Party wants Bob Corker to be outspoken, or do they want him to just kind of retire quietly, kind of go off into the sunset, stop kicking up all this dust?
I would think it would be closer to the latter. I think the reality is that people in Congress from the GOP realize they have to worry about voters in a way that Bob Corker does not. And so some of his preaching falls on deaf ears. But another reason why some of his preaching falls on deaf ears because Corker rarely is self-reflective about the role he has played in creating this cult of personality. He very much encouraged many of his own voters to get on the Trump train when the president was saying equally as problematic things more than a year ago as he's saying now. And so it's just really hard to listen to these sermons.
Yeah, very valid point there. Even at one point, Trump considered Bob Corker for Secretary of State.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, Eugene Scott, great to have your insights as always. Thank you very much.
All right, let's go to the new revelations involving the president's personal attorney, Michael Cohen. ABC News was the first to report that Cohen is expected to split with his current attorneys, Stephen Ryan and Todd Harrison. The network cites a source familiar with the matter as saying that a fee dispute is among the reasons for the change in counsel. The report by George Stephanopoulos also claims that Cohen is likely to cooperate. We have not been able to confirm that part of the actual story. People familiar with the matter tell NBC News, though, that Cohen has not even spoken to prosecutors yet about what he could offer.
Meanwhile, tomorrow is the deadline for Cohen's attorneys and the Trump legal team to finish identifying what material seized from the Cohen raids should be protected by attorney-client privilege. The New York Times, citing one person with knowledge of the legal shakeup, reports that the president has personally told people that he is angry at Cohen over the, quote, messiness of the situation, especially those aspects involving Stormy Daniels. Now, the report continues, quote, the president has also indicated to allies that he is worried that if he pushes Cohen away too hard, it could increase the likelihood that Cohen will offer information to the government. Here's the public face of the president's legal team, Rudy Giuliani, reacting last night.
He's not cooperating, nor do we care, because the president did nothing wrong. We're very comfortable if he cooperates, that there's nothing he can cooperate about. Michael Cohen, I think, would tell you he's got nothing incriminating with the president. And really, they should stop going after him. They're torturing the guy. The reality is they're trying to frighten him.
All right, so as the pressure intensifies and legal bills continue to mount, the Washington Post is citing people familiar with the situation, reports that Cohen is, quote, feeling neglected by the president, his long patron for whom he has long professed his loyalty. We should mention that Cohen has not been charged with a crime.
All right, joining us here on set, MSNBC legal analyst Danny Savalas. Danny, great to have you with us as always. Let's talk a little bit about what this actually means. Why would the change of Michael Cohen's team of attorneys have an impact on his possibility that he may actually cooperate with the government against the president?
It's only a possibility right now that Michael Cohen will cooperate with the government. It's one of many possibilities because there are many reasons why attorneys and clients separate. Sometimes we're required to separate if, for example, the client wants our advice in committing a future crime. Obviously, I'm not saying that's the case here, but that's one example. Sometimes it's as simple as a fee dispute. It's what we call Rule 1, the first rule for attorneys. You got to get paid. So if a client is not paying his bills, that can be grounds for withdrawal. So it could be a simple billing issue. It could also be a signal that he wants new attorneys to negotiate what's called a proffer agreement, a deal to come in and talk to U.S. attorneys and offer them whatever he has. And only if U.S. attorneys believe he's telling the truth and they like what they're hearing, will they even consider making a deal. And that would take many, many days, those meetings. Why would he need
new attorneys to do something like that?
He doesn't necessarily need new attorneys to do that. But this could signal a dispute over strategy. It could signal a simple a money choice, because Cohen may be thinking to himself, well, maybe I'll go with an attorney who is smaller infrastructure, smaller overhead, and he can negotiate this proffer more cheaply than these guys who are reviewing documents at $1,000 an hour.
Yeah, Michael Avenatti yesterday mentioned, very quickly, Michael Avenatti mentioned yesterday this was costing him almost $500,000 a week to defend himself.
Yeah, you guys want to bring up that Gabe Sherman tweet again so we could read it to Danny so he could weigh in on this. So Gabriel Sherman tweeted this out yesterday, I believe. A person close to Cohen says he hasn't flipped yet. Quote, he's sending up a smoke signal to Trump that I need help. What do you make of this, considering the news that we're hearing with regards to him separating from his current attorneys?
That could be accurate. Now is the time to send up that signal. The time to approach the U.S. attorneys and ask for a proffer or a deal is before you're indicted. Earlier is better. You want to be first in line if you're going to make that critical decision to seek to cooperate with the government. But even if you do, I can't stress enough that you have to tell the government the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And they have to believe you have something good to give them on somebody else, usually somebody higher up the chain.
It may have been coincidental, but yesterday Rudy Giuliani goes on the air saying that, you know, he's being treated badly. They're trying to pick on this guy, on Michael Cohen. So I wonder if he also saw the reports that Michael Cohen has been somewhat disappointed with the lack of defense coming from the Trump camp.
So using that as a defense.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Danny Saval, great to have you on set. I always appreciate your insights.
All right, still ahead, everybody. New figures shedding light on President Trump's potential impact on the midterm elections. We're going to break down the numbers and the message voters may be sending the president in November.
Plus, Bill Cairns is back with details on the oppressive heat wave making its way across the country. When we return, stay with us. Welcome back, everyone. A new Suffolk University Cincinnati Enquirer poll shows the upcoming November election for Ohio voters is all about President Trump. Voters in the state said that they intend to send the following message with their vote in November. 49% said it is to change the direction Trump is leading the nation. 28% said it is to support the direction Trump is going. And 19% said their vote has not much to do with the president. The poll also finds that Trump's approval rating among Ohio voters is 37%. Nearly 6 in 10 voters disapprove of the president's job performance.
And Bill Cairns' approval rating is going to rely on this forecast. Bill,
super high.
What does the weekend weather
I get the highest
look like?
Approval rating you've ever seen.
So good.
So good. Yeah, I'm the only one that get approved around here. The enhanced risk continues through the Dakotas today. That's going to be one of the stories of severe storms. The heat, though, is so many people have been feeling it ever since May. We ended up, remember, with the hottest May in the lower 48 we've ever had, and it's continued into June. Now is when we're supposed to be getting the heat waves, and we got it. 109 in Phoenix today. We're 90s from Texas all the way to South Dakota. 90s arrive into areas around St. Louis today. Typical storms in the southeast. Got a nice summer day for you. D.C., Philadelphia, Baltimore, New York, all the way through New England. It's actually clearing out behind that storm from yesterday. So now let's get into the weekend forecast heading to Father's Day. So as for Friday, we have some remnants from what was Hurricane Bud. It's going to go through Cabo San Lucas today, about 50 to 30 mile per hour winds. Not a big deal. And then some of the cloud and rain will make it to the southwest. That'll end the heat wave in Arizona and New Mexico. Still very hot on Friday in the middle of the country. By the time we get to Saturday, some of that warmth spreads. 97 in St. Louis, 97 in Nashville. So now we got the heat heading through the Tennessee Valley, and it will arrive on the East Coast Sunday into Monday. So keep that in mind. Just your typical afternoon storms in the southeast. There's the potential for some of that heavier rain from what was Hurricane Bud, and also some storms in the north. So let's get to your Father's Day forecast. And I mentioned the warmth, 95 degrees heading through areas like Roanoke, 97 in Charlotte. So some of that hottest conditions of the summer are arriving on the East Coast. Pretty nice in areas of New England, 82 in Boston. I know D.C. and New York should both be in the mid to upper 80s. The 90s should arrive in New England as we go through Monday. The worst weather will probably be areas of the Dakotas. And watch out around Houston. Potential for a soggy Father's Day Sunday.
Oh.
Well, I'll tell you what, you got our approval rating.
I think it jumped about 10 points after
You didn't say
that
what the approval rating was. You just said you just gave it to me.
Yeah, you're approved. All right.
Is there like a stamp? Is there an amen stamp? We need a sound effect and a stamp.
I think we should all move on from this.
Yeah. Thanks, Bill. Still ahead, the Federal Reserve raises interest rates to their highest level in a decade and signals that more hikes actually could still be on the way.
Plus, it's a bidding war for 21st Century Fox's assets as Comcast makes a rival offer to Disney's. Details on those stories and the others driving your business day coming up.
Welcome back. The Federal Reserve has approved another rate hike, the second hike since Fed Chairman Jerome Powell took over the central bank back in February. CNBC's Joanna Brisecci joins us live from London. And Joanna, yesterday's hike may have been a little bit of a setback for Wall Street, but the question is, how will the move translate for consumers?
That's right, Louis. So it is the 7th hike they've done in the last 2 years, and they've committed to another 2 more hikes in 2018, another 3 hikes next year as well. So a little more than halfway through the process. And of course, markets, as you said, did turn red once the announcement came out. But it is not all bad news for the U.S. consumer. They're hiking because the U.S. economy is strong, and it's also a good thing for savings. But what it does mean is likely that your mortgage bills and your credit card bills are going to get a little bit more expensive. According to Wallet Hub analysis, an extra 25 basis points equates to $1.6 billion in extra finance charges for credit cards across the spectrum. So you want to keep an eye on that. Elsewhere, I just want to bring your attention to Comcast news. We talked about this yesterday. AT&T, of course, have their approval now to acquire Time Warner. And so this has repercussions for the industry. Comcast have now formalized their $65 billion bid for Fox's assets. This is higher than some estimates of $60 billion. And of course, it puts them in a bidding war against Disney. Now, the Disney bid requires a little bit of financing. Comcast's bid, which is the parent owner of this company, is all cash, which puts them in a slightly better position. But of course, we have to see how this plays out in the next couple of months. It's going to be exciting.
And Joanna, what would the business hit be without our weekly fast food story? Domino's is thinking out of the box and hitting the pavement in the name of pizza safety. What can you tell us?
So Domino's attention seems to be shifting away from pizzas to infrastructure. They've apparently partnered up with 20 towns and cities to help repave some of the potholes. So they're tackling infrastructure directly. And just so you know, hundreds of recently repaved potholes in 4 towns in Texas, Delaware, Georgia, and California now feature the company's marketing slogan, "Oh yes, we did." So they have done it. And that's good news for you, Louis, because it means your Hawaiian pizza will arrive to you safe and sound.
That will arrive safely.
All the ingredients are going to arrive on top of the pizza. None of them are going to be bouncing around.
That means a lot. You know, you want your pizza to be safe and contained and get there.
I mean, look, I will take a hit. If I have to order a lot of pizzas in order to get the roads paved, I'll do it. You know?
It is worth every dollar. It is worth every dollar. One more reason to buy pizza.
Thing. It's IHOB, and it stands for burgers. I know that might.
That is crazy. That is crazy.
Yeah, IHOP is now IHOB.
International House of Burgers?
Doesn't make sense.
Strange.
Okay.
All right.
Coming up, everybody, Axios' Nick Johnston has a look at this morning's One Big Thing. And coming up on Morning Joe, is the president's former personal attorney set to cooperate with prosecutors? The new reports on Michael Cohen and what a shakeup in his legal team could signal about his strategy in his pending criminal probe.
Plus, the president's praise for dictators. More of his new interview sharing admiration for autocratic rulers following the Korea summit. House Intel Committee member Jim Himes weighs in, plus Republican Congressman Mark Sanford discusses his primary loss in South Carolina and the role his criticisms of the president may have played in that. Morning Joe, everyone, just moments away. All right, joining us from Washington, D.C. with a look at Axios AM, editor-in-chief for Axios, Nicholas Johnston. Nick, great to have you with us on this Thursday morning. What is Axios' one big thing for us?
The one big thing today is President Trump's jarring extremes. You may remember it was just 7 months ago that the president was referring to North Korean President Kim Jong-un as Little Rocket Man, is a sick puppy. Compare that to what the president said just over the weekend after the summit, after their historic meeting, said he was a tough negotiator, very talented, a great man. It's a symbol of how the president can move from one extreme to the other in dealing with both his staff and other world leaders. The same thing happened to Justin Trudeau. When he visited the United States recently, Trump and Trudeau were the best of friends. Now, of course, on his trade to Singapore, the president went after him on Twitter, particularly after that G7 summit. So we're looking at how quickly Trump can go hot and cold on world leaders.
So Nick, do you think that this was part of the president's strategy, that he saw the Singapore summit as part of his long game when he began the whole Rocket Man scenario?
It was certainly, I think, an effort to sort of push them. I think less so the Twitter strategy than what some of the military strategy was, some of the exercises with the South Koreans and the Japanese in the region to show that the North Koreans that they're serious. But Trump does much view the issue with North Korean as a great man moment for his president, something that he may be remembered for in history. And I think that's why he focused so much on having this summit come through and have such kindness and nice words to say about Kim Jong-un to push it to the next level afterwards.
So let me ask you this. If you survey all of the president's relationships with other world world leaders. Is there an example out there where the president has a good working relationship with a world leader on a personal level, but also on a policy level? Because immediately I think to mind, like how everyone said the relationship with Emmanuel Macron was really good, but there are some very stark policy differences between France and the U.S., even with China. He says, I have a really good relationship with President Xi, but then there's a trade war going on.
Right. I think a lot with the G7 and the other major powers, we've seen that hot and cold. There's one world power where it's just been good news, and that's the Saudi Arabians. And one way to look at that is remember the president's visit to Saudi Arabia.
Oh, yeah.
What a show that was. And the Saudis were very smart in playing to that. They know exactly what President Trump likes. How do we know it worked out well? We've spoken to people that speak to the president regularly, and he often comments, reflecting back on that, how great the swords and the pageantry and the pomp and circumstance. He loved it, and the Saudis played it correctly.
Not to mention the Saudis projected a big image of President Trump on the side of his hotel. You remember that? They can't go wrong with that. They had a big light show with President Trump's face right on that hotel.
Let's quickly talk, while I have you, quickly want to talk about Rudy Giuliani here. I know that Axios has new reporting with regards to his son losing his West Wing access. What happened?
Right. Andrew Giuliani, Rudy's son, is a regular at Mar-a-Lago. He's a great golfer. He regularly plays with the president, and the president sees him as a friend, and so went to White House Chief of Staff John Kelly and said, let that guy